What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with John Hanson, who is a retired CID officer in the West Midlands Police. He first became interested in the UFO subject in January 95, after colleagues sighted a UFO hovering over some trees. Now, this was the trigger for his curiosity, which prior to that, the very mention of UFOs and flying saucers was impossible for him to accept as having any reality in the modern world. The publication of 11 volumes of his books Haunted Skies, which he has painstakingly catalogued thousands of reports of UFOs and close encounter experiences by the public from 1940 onwards. It's a project that John and his partner Dawn Holloway have been working on for many years. John Hanson, welcome to the show.
And welcome to speaking to you, Kevin, finally.
Yeah, John, we've been trying to do this for a number of years. I'm sure it was a couple of years ago we touched base.
Well, we did. Well, was it perhaps a little bit longer? But at least we've achieved it, and we've got together now.
We have someone from the UK, someone that's doing some fantastic bloody work in the UFO community. My God, you've 11 books in right now.
That's correct, but I should just to remind you, and also the people that will ultimately be watching this, that there is a glitch in the system because we lost 6 books last year they were taken off the internet by the ex-publisher. I'm certainly not going to mention his name because that would be unethical. Those books were removed. Now, what has happened now is that Dawn Holloway and I, have to reissue those books, but we will now reissue them twice as thick in colour. And we've just, as we said before we came on air, I've just finished the revised volume 1, which will cover from something like 1910 to 1959. So, yeah, I mean, the problem is, Kevin, there's too much stuff. There's too much imagery. There's too many reports. It's overwhelming. And, that's how it is.
I'm overwhelmed with what you're doing, to be honest with you. The nature of the beast of what you've taken on here, no one else has done before. And the scope of it, when you look at other countries and their equivalent years as well, because all you're doing is just the UK mainly, isn't it? These books are based on.
Well, not necessarily. No. We've actually, ridiculous really, but we did, I think, in volume 10. You see, without the books, I would get confused because there's so much stuff. But we did cover some early Australian reports, and we were assisted by people in Australia. So there is that sort of, we can run that against the British stuff. And obviously, if you've got a sighting on the 6th of November, 66, and a sighting on the same date, bearing in mind the difference in time, in Australia, it's important to put that in because it's important to contrast these cases.
Yes.
But yeah, we have done that, but we optimistically thought we'd get up to 78, and we haven't got anywhere near there yet. I mean, we haven't. It's taken us, 20 years, and we haven't even got up to volume 12. We've got all the information, which is 1991, and I won't take the Skype off the desk, but towards the left of me is a huge, terrific, enormous amount of files which cover the 1995 period. That's in Britain alone.
My God.
I think my greatest frustration is that I cannot get anything into the nationals who had the books in the first place, because they were quite excited about volume 1, have never, ever put anything in about the work that we're doing. And I think that's pretty obvious why they've adopted that attitude.
Well, why? Why do you think?
Because it's too serious a research. And it's, I've been looking at opinions expressed by many scientific researchers in this subject going back to the 50s. And they ultimately always felt that there was an inherent problem in trying to make members of the scientific community understand that there is a need to research into this, but instead it's still rejected. I think I mentioned to you that I did email a Professor Brian Cox after he was interviewed on a BBC programme a couple of years ago, and somebody was foolish enough to ask him about UFOs, and he said they were a load of bollocks. And of course, bollocks in the English dictionary can mean a number of things, but that is the attitude of members of the scientific community. But I've met members of the scientific community. I've met nuclear scientists, and I've met guys, physicists, that have seen UFOs. And I think all we'd like to ask is, what are they, and where do they come from?
Well, absolutely, and a load of bollocks. Yeah, well, when I spoke to Linda Moulton Howell just the other day, I did say to her that we're one planet out of a trillion planets just in our galaxy, and potentially, approximately, they say 170 billion galaxies exist in the observable universe, but there's no life out there.
There's only life on here.
There's only life on here. That's where it all started. There's no such thing as consciousness. It's all in the brain, and all that we see around us is just what there is. This whole UFO phenomena, the work as I see it is shifting into the realms of consciousness as well. And we're going to get into that later on. That actually the whole phenomena, as we understand it, is not what we think it is. It's something far greater than that.
I agree with you on that. Yeah.
And there's lots of researchers that are just into nuts and bolts.
There are indeed, but of course times have changed. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there are so many people that really thought this was all of these sightings, particularly during the great waves of the last century. They thought this was the spearhead of some imminent invasion by extraterrestrials. And although I don't think anybody can prove that they're extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or whatever words they come up with, I don't think anybody can actually prove it. But one thing is quite clear: whatever these things are, they've been here for one hell of a long time.
Right.
And in my view, they're indigenous to planet Earth, but they have certainly the capacity. They're not Earth-bound, are they?
No, absolutely not. And you've gone back to 1910, but as you say, from day dot they were here. And you could go back a lot further. Your books could, but of course, there's a chronological order to the way that you've done your books, which is wonderful. And I mean, hats off to you for what you're doing, because no one else has done or is doing the preservation that for future generations as well. I mean, is that one reason for doing this?
That is the reason for it, because some people might imagine that having published all of these books, that we would be in demand from many people who wanted to interview us or interview me or want to discuss the subject. Our telephone details and website details are available for everybody. But you can hear the clock ticking here. It never happens. It hasn't happened for many years. I will just say that when I was doing preparing the Charles Holt book last year, I was invited down by a gentleman who I will not name, but his name's in the book. He invited me down to the Daily Mirror, and he said, "Look, John, you've had a bad deal. It's about time we gave you some publicity. It would have to be something like crazy ex-cop hunts UFOs." Well, I could put up with that as long as the meat of the interview was about the work that we're doing. And suffice to say, I ended up at the Daily Mirror, an arduous journey on the tube, exciting place, London. We went there previously to outside 10 Downing Street. But anyway, to cut a long story short, a nice black coffee, a beer in a local restaurant, and suffice to say, nothing at all. And I did tell the gentleman concerned, in actual fact, we do send the books to the Prime Minister. And of course, a lot of people in this business will laugh but why not? Why not? I mean, we get letters back from them thanking us for the books. If we can enlighten them in any shape, manner, or form, that's good. And there are other people who are also hopefully being enlightened as such. But there's so much stuff out there, and we need to preserve it, because in 100 years' time, when you and I aren't here, but you're only a young lad, so maybe you might be here. I don't know. Joking apart, people are going to look back, and they're going to look back on the events of the 20th century and the beginning to the mid 21st century. And unless they have an accurate account to the best of our ability,
yes,
it's not going to change anything, is it?
Well, welcome to new media, where pop-up shows like myself can come up and actually broadcast content without any production company behind us to tell us what we should or shouldn't say, and allows you the freedom to come on and actually attracts the right audience that actually would be interested in this subject. When you go on mainstream TV, it's not, it's that audience is not really interested in every single subject that comes on there, where this is finely tuned. And who knows, one day people will come across these interviews, and there will be some preservation of the work that goes along with it as well, that you've done.
I agree, and I would like to say you're a very respectable gentleman, which you are, and you're well respected within the UFO community for the podcasts that you do and the interviews. Sadly, there are others that try and emulate you, and unfortunately commit themselves to vicious attacks on others to try and raise their ratings. It's something that I absolutely abhor. And again, without going into details, which I won't, that is the sad state of affairs. But it's good that somebody like yourself, an anchor man of all of this, can take the time an opportunity to have a natter with me, and let's hopefully, raise the bar with this.
Well, yeah, look, everyone's doing the best they can. That's what I say. There's attacks on people. They're just in that moment doing the best they can. It's maybe not as good as they could have done, right? But it's the best they're trying to do. And so I believe everyone's got a purpose for what they're there to do. I just believe that as I said before, there seems to be a bigger nature to this than anybody's understanding. So forget scientific understanding. It's probably way beyond our understanding where we are right now. And even when we try to connect the dots, it's still very very vague. It's not. There's no definitiveness in this. I mean, they're not coming forward to us right now and saying this is our purpose, this is what we are, but there are clues. So I really want to get into some of the sightings that you've documented, because it's just, I mean, that's the great thing about your work as well, is it's not your truth, it's the truth of the people that saw these sightings. You can't take away that truth.
But you can't. But on occasion, I have been also attacked by people, very nice people actually, that believe that me getting close to people and going out to interview them and getting to know them is a bad thing. Now, I don't know. You can't keep everybody happy in this business, but I've certainly, I would say that 60-70% of UFO classic encounters, if you like, British classic UFO encounters of the mid to late 20th century, I've been to see those people. I mean, you can't talk about Margaret Fry and Margaret Westwood and Margaret Webb and others, and who've had these fantastic sightings, and Jesse Rostenberg, without having got off your backside and gone to see them. And that is the way that I work. And I certainly don't have much time for armchair ufologists. You've got to get out there. These people are still out there. They're in their 90s. I mean, a few weeks ago, Dawn and I went to see Jimmy Salandin, Salandin. Well, Jimmy Salandin is 90 years of age, ex-RAF flight lieutenant. In October 54, he was flying his jet fighter when he saw these three objects come up, and bun-shaped objects filled the windscreen. I mean, amazing guy. But he says, like so many others, look, I'm not saying they're extraterrestrials. I'm not saying these are aliens. What I'm saying to you, John, this is what we saw, and this is how it is. But of course, other people have come up with a myriad of ridiculous explanations for what he saw, but that goes on.
Yeah, and completely taking his truth away from it, and just, their truth becomes the only truth. Absolutely, because they're not able to take in what he's saying. There's a guy that's trained to be in, the bloody most. He's trained to be as calm as anybody can be in the most intense situations, and this is the truth of what he saw, as so many others. Right, well, we've just moved downstairs in this interview because upstairs we were having a few signal issues there, so I think this is going to be a lot better.
Well, I hope so.
I hope so as well. No, I've got faith, John. This is good.
We're here at 8 o'clock tonight.
On that third question, no, it's all gonna be good. No, this is much better. Okay, now I was just about to ask you when I was upstairs, just about your son's sighting, in a sense, that set you off on this course. So just, I mean, very briefly, just what was your son's sighting, and then how did that lead you to, going in on this amazing career that this sort of kind of second career that you've been on?
Right. So anyway, Chris, my son, he was a copper. He joined the force as I'd retired, as such, and he was directed to a report of a UFO which was seen to land, which was alleged to have been seen to land in a Birmingham suburb, a place called Sturchley, which isn't too far away from the Tally-Ho Police Training Centre. So he had a policewoman with him at the time, and they went along to have a look, and they thought it was highly funny until they saw this object that Chris said reminded him of a quarter pounder, a burger hovering above a tree with a blue field of energy around it. Was massive, the length of 3 buses, completely silent, and it got this thin red line rippling through the middle. And within seconds, the object had gone. And the policewoman, who I also spoke to, said she kept pinching Chris's arm. She could not believe what she was seeing. Anyway, as a result of that, it was either to carry on going into Victorian tips looking for Victorian bottles, which I haven't done since I got involved in this, which I did also enjoy, or look into this particular subject. So I was fascinated, and I contacted the Birmingham Evening Mail. They had heard about it because the people that investigated it in those days were able to get a copy of the police log itself. Highly unusual, but the police, the West Midlands Police, sent this couple, Rob and Marilyn Aldworth, a copy of the log, and that's how it all started, really. And I traced other people who had seen mysterious objects a few minutes after Chris had seen it, a D-shaped object which was following the contours of the land in Wheatley, Oxfordshire. Went and interviewed the lady concerned, and I still then thought, well, is there any depth to this? Is there anything worth researching into? And it's like most things in life, the deeper you get, the more you find, and in a way, it's horrifying, it's chilling, it's enjoyable. And to use the word enjoyable is something you would never have used to Gordon Creighton, the editor of Flying Saucer Review, because I had the pleasure of meeting him many years ago, and he said, well, I fully support you writing some books, John. And he said, I think we just got folders with loose folders with papers in it. And he said, I'll make you and Dawn consultants of FSR. And I have a lot of correspondence from him. And once I said it's enjoyable, and he said something like, it's not enjoyable, it's serious stuff, Mr. Hanson. And yeah, he's right, it is serious stuff. But what a smashing bloke. I have nothing but praise for him.
Absolutely. Well, I think you have to enjoy your work. That's one thing I've learned the hard way. That's my truth, anyway. If you can't enjoy it, why are you doing it? And
that's right.
You have to, yeah.
So leading on from Chris, then that was 95. Now 95 was a particularly extremely busy year, and the thing is, if you ask even in UFO enthusiasts, if you said what happened in 95, they'd probably think, well, yeah, we'll go and look on the internet, or there was a bit of activity, or there was a few sightings of this, a few sightings of that. But in reality, there was a terrific, huge number of sightings. And why shouldn't they be preserved? That's always been my passionate argument about this stuff. It should be preserved, not for us, because it should be preserved for future generations, because we don't know how all this is going to turn out, do we?
No, we do not. And what you and Dawn have done is absolutely amazing. So when did Dawn come into this work then as well?
Well, I did a talk at the local college, and at the time I was talking about Tony Dodd and UFO magazine, and I think it's an incident in South Africa. And Dawn came along to listen, and she told me she'd got some photographs of triangular UFOs, and that's how we got to be friends. And ultimately, we ended up living together. But yeah, she was over the years. She's taken photographs, and there's some quite mysterious things have turned up. The one at Barmouth is showing two black triangles moving across the sky. Wiltshire about 6 months ago. It's a classic saucer-shaped object that appears to be coming through into our sky. And the thing is, these are not birds or aircraft or anything. But I don't know what they are. I'm not qualified to say what they are because I don't know. But I've also we were in Devon a few weeks ago. And interesting, this one, at 9:30 on the 3rd of June, and Dawn said to me, that looks like a rocket going across the sky. Well, we'd been there for a week, and it's a regular location of ours, so we're well used to aircraft going over and leaving vapor trails, and God knows what else they leave. But this is quite normal. And I looked, and I thought it was an aircraft. It was leaving twin vapor trails. heading in a straight trajectory away from the coast towards the northeast. So I took some photographs of it, and when you check the photographs, you've got a very strange object. It hasn't really got any wings at all. Very strange. But I sent that to the to the Bideford North Journal, and they published it last week. But I have to say that the media the local newspapers are fantastic. There's always a twist, because there has to be a twist on anybody that gets involved in UFOs, because most people regard people like myself and others as being a bit nutty. Simple as that. But how nutty can it be when all you ever do is present the evidence of members of the public?
Yes, of course.
And we spoke about Jimmy Salandin.
Yeah.
Also many other officers, RAF officers that I've had the pleasure of speaking to over the years. And yeah, how long can we ignore this for? But we have ignored it, haven't we?
Yes. Well, or it's always been there, and the nature of the reality of it is that it has not wanted to come forward, and it's allowing us to make up our own truth on what this may be, and allowing us free will just to not interfere with the population as a whole, or mass population in a sense, even though there has been close encounters of the third kind, and contact has been made in many different stories out there, and actual cases out there. There's something in the nature of this where it's almost it's allowing us to have some sort of free will in this, and when we're ready, that's when they'll be ready, in a sense. But we're not, and it doesn't seem to be. When I say they're ready, in the cases that you've covered, there's not just one species here, is there? There seems to be multiple species engaged in planet Earth.
I agree. There certainly appears to be, but I mean, sometimes people ask me about abductions, and I say, well, I can't prove that alien abductions take place. I can't. What I can prove is that I've spoken to enough ladies and men and women that have had, unfortunately, got perhaps too close to the fields of energy that surround these objects, and a series of strange things happen to them. And some of them do have marks, end up with marks on their body, and some of them do have all sorts of strange things happen to them. So it's important to document that, but I can't categorically say I believe in alien abductions, because I don't. But I believe that, of course, UFOs exist, and that if one gets too close to them, a lot of strange things happen. I remember what it is, Chris Robinson. I think he's the psychic detective, a hell of a nice guy. He was employed by Her Majesty's government some years ago to assess the risk of terrorist action. But he had these precognitions, and a really nice guy. But when he was 17, he and a number of other people, there was a classic UFO sighting over the estate where they lived, and these things came down pretty close. And he like me, wonders whether there is an association between the change in his life afterwards and what happened with this UFO activity. And that, of course, does happen. But I have to say, one of the most interesting guys I've ever met in many years is Tony Peake. I don't know if you've interviewed Tony.
No.
Tony Peake, well, he showed us, the difference between we look through our eyes and we look at reality. He showed us what really reality is only what the brain is seeing, and the eyes. And when he said to me, he said it's a bit like if you go into somebody's house and you haven't been in that house for a long time, and you walk in, you think, hello, the television's been moved. Now, why would you remember that? And he explains that what happens is that everything you see is actually upside down, size of a postcard, but our brain paints a picture. It's a bit like our brain does all the bits around the edge, and then reminds us. And he said, that's what happens when you go somewhere and there's something out of sync. You know it straight away because the brain has painted the picture in which you see, and the eyes tell a different story. And so we met him at, he gave a talk at ASAP at Warwick some years ago, Tony Peake. And he's one of the most interesting guys I've ever had the pleasure to talk to, because you can learn so much from him. And, you know, as you said before, it's about perception, it's about conception, it's about what we see and interpretation.
Yes.
And
the
we
nature.
are only humans.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he sounds so interesting. Yeah, as I was. Yeah, I completely agree with you. The nature of our reality, as we understand it, may not be. The framework of existence, our understanding is not even close to it. Yeah, you know, I know what we see with our eyes, but is it the actual bigger picture? Okay, just bringing this back a little bit as well. When Dawn took those pictures as well, that's very interesting. That as people do, there's nothing in the sky. They take the picture, they've captured something. Isn't that incredible? That somehow it's capturing what we can't see with our own frequency range in our eyes.
Well, you're right. Dawn would never regard herself as psychic at all.
No.
In fact, she's quite a shy woman. She'll never appear in any podcast.
Yeah.
Because she just doesn't want to appear. But she's quite capable of holding an in-depth discussion about the subject. And Dawn's role is to proofread and edit the books.
Yes.
Some years ago, we looked for somebody to proofread and edit them after we set ourselves up as publishers. And some people were wanting like £3 or £4 grand, £1,000 each to do a book. Well, of course, Dawn's a qualified secretary, and she's bloody good. So she does the proofreading and editing. I just put it together. Yeah. So, so that's where Dawn comes from.
So Dawn has been a gift, basically, to yourself with this work. I'm going to say that, absolutely. Right?
A treasure.
A treasure.
I would say.
Yeah, a treasure. Yeah.
Sorry, Kevin, I was just going to say that in reality, these books should never have been published because, for a start, they cost an incredible amount of money to put together. And recently we had to raise the prices on the last book because we were having to pay for the books. We were having to pay for the books ourselves. I mean, if somebody bought a book, we're lucky if we make £1 profit, but we were losing £1 a book. So we had to raise the prices. So it's one of the things. But of course, that was the first book.
I mean, look at the size of these books. Just look at the size of these books. Yeah.
That's not that thick, actually. But
no.
That was the first book. That was followed by the second book, and the graphic work is by David Sankey.
Beautiful. It's beautiful.
Really nice, David. And then that was the volume 3, I think. That British stuff. That's followed by volume 4. And then volume 5. But you'll see a difference in a minute. There's volume 5. And there's volume 6 that covers the Broadhaven wave, the Dovehead wave. But sadly, all the books are not in colour, you see. And then, of course, we couldn't afford the process of getting these books published through CFZ Press in Devon, because in order to do the books, we had to travel backwards and forwards each month, 200-mile trip, to sit with the publisher to do them. And we just couldn't cope with it's
too much. Yeah.
So in the end, we set ourselves up volume 7, which is much thicker. That is in black and white. But volume 8, which covers a lot about Rendlesham and the Alan Godfrey case and Zygmunt Adamski, as you can see, is getting to be.
Wow. So basically, okay, yep.
Then it gets thicker and it gets thicker. The whole book will probably be 800 pages.
It's incredible. Well, this is what I'm saying. It's incredible what you've done, and to be self-published, to have to learn all that trade as well, which you have, is amazing. Now, just remind us of your website as well.
That's www.hauntedskies.co.uk.
Okay. Now, what is the best way for people to get the books from yourself? Is that directly through Amazon or directly from your website?
Well, volumes 1 to 6 are no longer available because they were taken off for sale last October, and that is it. That's we've had to do a revised volume 1 in colour twice as thick. That's completed. That will be up for sale soon. Hell of a lot of work to do now. But yeah, they're on Amazon. Volumes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are on Amazon and other web seller book sites. As I said to you before, I apologise for the price. I think they're 30 quid or something. But you know, the ink alone is something like about £22. We don't make money on these. I'm not, I'm not embarrassed to say that probably we spent over 20 grand. We'll never get back so far, but you can't place a value on the pleasure of the books and what they mean to people, to members of the public, and what they will mean to future generations. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Hats off to you both. It really, really is. And I wanted to include Dawn in this as well, because I know some interviews, it's not, she's not always mentioned, but it's been both of you that have made this possible, and it's just fascinating to see you to see where you're going to take this as well. Okay, well, your books have been coming up on the screen, and so has your website. And we're just touching the interview here. We're not stopping just yet. I just wanted to get the books in there to mention them. Now, okay, wow, so many ways we could take this. Let's just go to the Rendlesham Forest case as well, just very briefly. Now, I've interviewed Linda Moulton Howe about this, and she tells me that when during a regression session, I think it was in 94 or 95, in that regression session, it was stated that this craft was consciously intelligent. Yeah, it was conscious, the craft was, that the Colonel touched. And
Well, the Colonel.
sorry, not the Colonel, sorry, that the
John Burrow.
John Barrow touched, yeah, sorry. And I think it was John Barrow that was in the regression session. And it told him that, as he brought this through, that it was from the future, potentially 40 to 50,000 years into the future, and it was collecting genetic material.
Well,
Have you heard of that?
Oh, God, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Right, that's odd. We're getting the feedback again now.
Odd, isn't it? Okay. Let's keep going. Let's just keep going.
No, we're going to keep going because we're not going to be put off by this.
No.
But yes, of course, I've heard of that, and I've met John Burroughs over the years, and Jim Penniston, and of course Charles Holt. But with the Rendlesham incident, what you have to understand is that it wasn't just a UFO sighting in Rendlesham. It was a huge wave of activity around the East Anglia area. For argument's sake, you yourself will probably know about the Belgium UFO wave of the late 1980s. But how many people realise, and if you look at the map, you'll see that we're adjacent Belgium, a map on the world. Belgium's opposite us, broadly speaking. and there was a huge wave around the Colchester, Essex, and Suffolk during the 1980s and the 1990s. And we tried to get the local newspapers interested in it, but they weren't. So history, if we don't put this stuff out, history will record that there were no triangular UFO sightings. There wasn't a wave of them around the Essex area in the late 1980s. But we have a lot of reports, including one you'll probably laugh. But we did track down a guy who's he's in his 90s, and he's I think he's an ex-army guy, and he does a lot of charity work in the Suffolk area. A smashing bloke, and he told me that he was at the campsite at the end of December, and he also saw some very odd things as well. So, even today, I've been trying to get some further information on a sighting over RAF Greatwood on the 27th of December 1980 at 8:20 p.m. when a couple were on their way home, saw these 4 red glowing lights forming a block square moving over, and that was on the same night of oil. So of course it isn't just about what they saw.
Incredible. Yeah.
Incredible stuff. Yeah.
But you know this guy. He's gone down into regression. Now, some people will say you should never, shouldn't do that because you're just prone to making things up. I don't believe that. I think you're tapping into a purest part of yourself. And this guy, that's his truth that he said during regression. That's what the craft told him, apparently, this conscious craft. And it's an incredible story. It's an incredible encounter, isn't it? That potentially we're not just dealing with interdimensional travelers that have come to this planet. We're not dealing with maybe beings that have been living on among us, but actually there's also the timeline from the future as well, that have come back here. I mean, there's as I say, there's a much bigger picture to all this. It's not just one or the other. There's lots of things happening here.
Well, I agree. I mean, we have some pretty impressive technology at the moment. I mean, I think currently we're trying to destroy ourselves with all these particle accelerator experiments.
Yes, true.
Particle accelerators have been around since the 1930s. And I think that the effects of what's happening there is maybe far greater than we could ever perceive. For me, it's dangerous stuff. Yeah. But if we're doing that now, and we're trying to split atoms and doing all sorts of things, and finding black holes and God knows what, in 50, 60, 70, in 200 years' time, what are we going to be able to do then? And so, I think that people in the future, if you like, can come back into the past.
Well, what if the idea is as well that future, present, and past is all one? It's all happening now. That Linda talked about that as well. And if that is the case, I said to her, it almost gets into the consciousness region. Well, what if those from the future, or species that are beings that have been around a lot longer than we have a very much deeper understanding about the nature of who we truly are, that we're potentially, just potentially, that we're a soul and a body, we've always been, we always will be, reincarnation is a possibility as well, and that really they are really searching for their truth on what the nature of reality is. And the nature of reality potentially is consciousness, and the whole UFO phenomena, in a sense, is you could turn it on its head and say, well, maybe it's not even what we thought it was. Maybe it's they're on a mission of evolution, or of consciousness evolution, or something else. Now, I know this is, to some, is very hairy-fairy, but when you consider, if you've gone past egoism, if you've gone past money and other things, and you're looking at, you're on a more divine level, in a sense.
Well, hypothetically, if we, both of us, were to represent beings from hundreds, if not thousands of years in the future, I'm sure that our topic of conversation is probably trying to alter what took place in the 21st century, because there's one thing quite clear: if we don't change the way in which we live on this planet, it's possible that in 250, whatever years, that Armageddon will happen, and it will be as a result of man's actions, probably nothing to do with any extraterrestrials, because we are destroying the planet in various ways. So there's us in the future thinking, well, let's bloody well try and change something, otherwise we're not going to be here.
Yes, especially if there's an understanding that we don't have right now of quantum physics and all sorts of other things that we think, absolutely. Who knows what's possible? And I think, when you look at this work from a different viewpoint, it actually maybe isn't even as scary as some people make it out to be as well. With some of the sightings that have been documented in your books as well, has there been sort of waves of triangles and waves of various other types of craft, or is there no sort of set patterns in a sense?
Well, in the line, first of all, when you go back to what the pilots saw in the Second World War, some of them described normally referred to as Foo Fighters. Some of them described seeing objects like Christmas trees covered in lights. Well, a Christmas tree is triangular, and some of them reported about triangular UFOs. And I've even got sightings by a Spitfire pilot in 1941 of a black triangle. So I think the stuff's all there. And I have to say that many years ago, one UFO researcher, a very famous person, tried to convince me that the aliens changed their vessels like man changes his cars from the early 40s to the sort of vehicles that we drive now.
That's interesting.
I think that's a little rubbish myself, because
Yeah.
I think UFOs, they've always been here. They've been here for probably millions of years. And like we touched on before about the way that the brain sees these things, maybe there's parts that show. Sometimes certain criteria have to be present in order for the UFOs to show. Sometimes they show us the side, sometimes they show us the top, sometimes. So, it's yes, there's been a lot of triangular stuff in the 1980s and 1990s. People say, well, maybe it was covert technology, but we didn't have covert technology. You know where I'm going with it. We certainly didn't. And as far as UFOs, in the Victorian era, and something else that fascinates me is the 13th, 15th century.
Yes.
There are so many sightings, and they're not bolides, they're not fireballs, they're not birds, they're not. They classically, I have to say, which is very important, out of all the thousands upon thousands of sightings that we've covered in this lot, it is predominantly the classic shape is not so much triangular or saucer shape, but three lights. The three lights forming a triangle. One light will then disappear over and then come back again. So many sightings involving three. So nothing. When I look at a UFO report, I'm always, the predominance of three separate objects, and of course, Sizewell B power station.
Oh yes.
Not. People will know about Victor J. Keene's research. I mean, I tried to get a photograph of Victor J. Keene, who's passed away. He's a guy from Belgium. He's lived in the London, Essex area. He covered the flying triangular sightings with Omar Fowler. And there are so many sightings of these things over the power stations. But a lot of people think that they're automatically black triangles, which they are, dense black, showing three lights and sometimes a light in the middle. More of a craft than anything else, but who knows? But
and that ability as well, like when Dawn took that photo, for example, where they just come in and out of our reality. They pop in and they pop out. It's almost like it's interdimensional travel. It's not. It's an understanding that's beyond me. But it's not like they're flying off. It's that they're either there sometimes, or they just pop out of our known space.
Well, I sense that they are there all of the time, and it's just, as I said before, when certain criteria happen.
That's interesting.
Will then see it. A classic, something else that always riveted my attention was down in the Warminster area in I can't think of the date now, 1970 something.
Right.
I spoke to a lady who was with her daughter one afternoon. The daughter was about 4, and she said, Mummy, look at that in the sky. So the mother went out and saw a cigar-shaped object hovering over some trees, not too far away, but not close enough to be of any real interest. But anyway, that was it as far as she was concerned, till the daughter said to her in the evening, Mummy, my stomach or my tummy hurts. I mean, I know that rhymes, mummy and tummy, but anyway, the mother looked down and there were 3 marks in a triangle on the child's stomach. So yeah, I mean, I don't know where that takes us, but then the odd thing is that when the husband returned home and he'd been working 20 miles away, the first thing he said was, "You won't believe this." He said, "But I've got a heck of an itch here and 3 triangular marks, but that isn't a one-off." quite a few cases like that. They're inexplicable. I can't understand.
Isn't it? And it's just so incredible. You know, one of my ideas was, you know, if past, present, and future is all one, what if these beings understand the nature of reality, the nature of the soul, the nature of consciousness, and they've also remembered their past lives? And actually, when they do abduct people, they're abducting past aspects of themselves in order to heal something in the future that's still not been healed from a past life. I know that sounds so absolutely absurd and crazy, but when you sometimes have to go into the madness just to make sense. You know, I'm just saying it's a possibility, isn't it? I mean, I don't know.
Anything is a possibility, but what you cannot remove, I mean, we can hypothesize as much as we like about all of this, but as I said to you, you cannot remove the hard core of evidence.
And that's what your book does. That's what you do.
It does indeed, yeah. I mean, recently I read something from some somebody, some website declaring that the Sheffield incident was so important. And it wasn't Sheffield, it was Shrewsbury, and it was a Val Walters case. Rosemary, sorry Val, I've forgotten Rosemary's last name, but I interviewed those ladies years ago, and we faithfully recorded what they'd experienced in one of the Haunted Skies books. Val Walters is, I mean, that's an amazing case, but so many other people have told me about these experiences. And you know, like yourself, you're interviewing me and we're talking together, but I mean, you've evaluated me, your brain's analysed me. You know that I'm not in need of psychiatric help. Well, at least I hope you don't. I might have an impression of you, but no. The world is our oyster there, and you've got a simple choice here. I mean, for years, man, or so we are led to believe, wants to get out into the planets. There's talk about us going to Mars in a few years' time.
There's talk.
But what about what's happening now? What about this indigenous species of some presumably alien, although it might have more right to planet Earth than we, if you think about it?
Yes.
We need to know more about it, and that's what we're doing.
And why then is the nature of this is they do not come forward in masses to make their presence known? Is that, as I say to some people, is that a sign of giving us free will, so for us to come up with our own truth rather than just appearing in front of us, godly like, being looked upon as gods in a sense, and us bowing down to them? Are they that evolved that it's like, no, there's, you know, for you to come to our level, there's that free will aspect for you to make your own truth up and to get to the level that we're at, then we can meet.
I don't think they need to, because people have often said to me, you know, why, if one can come through and 10 can come through, what about 1 million? But first of all, I don't think there are 1 million. I certainly don't think that's the case. But whatever they are and wherever they come from, they have one great advantage on man, right? They probably have lived for millennia. They're unlike us. Yes. You know, they're not construed by having a certain number of years to live, and so they have time on their hands. But as we said before, if in fact they are capable of intelligence such as we are, because their intelligence might be completely different, then they must be slightly worried, because we talked about us as coming from the future, you and I, and I hypothesized there. We would be worried. I would be. I'm worried myself by the way that things are happening on this planet. So I don't know. It's
well, I always say to myself, would I want extreme Islamic people? You know, like ISIS. I mean, Islam is a peaceful religion in its core, but those who are extremists, those kind of people in outer space in the future, I just don't know. I think I would contain us.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, but of course, sadly, slightly different subject, but it is pretty obvious to me, having got involved in all of this, that there is some form, I don't say deliberate programming, but subtle programming to ensure that we as members of the public only hear what we are allowed to hear,
Yes.
and only see what we are allowed to see.
Absolutely.
Because, I'm not talking about UFOs. I'm
Nope.
just talking
Nope.
about things generally.
Generally, yep. That's so
Yeah.
true, John. And David Icke, I know whether you're a fan or not, he says the same thing. There's so many other people who have said the same thing, that there is a control in place where it allows us not to go beyond too far. So when you get someone like yourself who has done this wonderful work, it's difficult to get it out there into the bigger that bigger message, because of the way that the nature of that we're programmed at our core. Yeah.
Well, go on. So it's a bit like, you don't think, when I first got involved in this, I didn't think I'd come up against a brick wall, but I have against a brick wall, because I don't know what these things are. I don't know where they come from. What we do know is that we know a great deal about their characteristics of behavior, because they nearly always are the same. So we know a great deal about them, if in fact them exists. But that's as far as we can go with it. But clearly the authorities don't want this serious research to be put out.
No.
In fact, a guy on the Daily Mail is mentioned on one of the backs of the books. He said to me, "Look, John," because this guy's been interviewing people since 1977, UFO stories, and he said, "John, they won't touch you with a barge pole because it's too serious a research, and they can't find anything to basically take the mickey out of."
Yeah, and you should be very proud of that, for what you've done. You should be.
I am, but also frustrated a little.
I know. But at least you're following your passion as well, which is you love to do this, and this in future, this is going to help people so much, and it has already, and it will continue to, because what you love to do is a natural side effect of helping people as well. What would you say, just very briefly then, is in all these books wonderful books that you've done, is there a common thread? For example, military bases or schools or underwater UFOs. Is there a common thread in a lot of this?
Well, UFOs have been seen over water, power installations, nuclear installations, but by the same token, they've been seen over locations that aren't. I think the common thread is what I said before. First of all, is that they've been here with us for a hell of a long time. They'll continue to be with us. I think after we've gone, which is quite frightening, but they'll always be here. And sometimes I get an impression that we talk about multiple dimensions, of which I know nothing about.
Nor do I.
One wonders if in fact this is evidence of our brush with another dimension that exists alongside of us, because if that is the case, then of course we would be talking about multiple dimensions. But it never ceases to be a fascinating subject. But you can't deny what people have seen. The only trouble I've ever found is UFO witnesses are fantastic people, pilots, police officers, members of the public, people that just say, "Look, this is what I saw." But then, of course, it's twisted, it's manipulated by the media, which it is. But people would say, "Well, hang on a minute. They faithfully reported what Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so saw last week." And I would say they have. But then if you try and explain to me, as we had recently, a spate of UFO activity over here, a guy saw an object over about 100 yards away from us.
Right.
And so did many other people. I tracked them down. And it was identical to what the guy in Scotland saw and photographed. Now, nobody's interested in the connection. Nobody's interested in that at all. A guy took a photograph of a UFO, end of story. I contacted the newspapers, and they're not interested, because it's just about a headliner.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. As long as it's fear-based, it will sell. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say then is your most important message of your work?
Well, the message is to preserve the culture, because it is UFOs are our social history. If you and I could recover records from the medieval ages and diaries and accounts from people, they'd probably be regarded as quite priceless and of extreme value to history. So why shouldn't UFOs fall into the same category? Because UFOs and their sightings and people's experiences, they provide us with so much information, which is to say is invaluable, and that's what I'm seeking to do. And I don't. It doesn't matter how many times people talk about their experiences. I do find and sightings. I find them absolutely fascinating, as I always have done, but not funny. I would never upset Mr. Gordon Crane again.
No, absolutely not. I will just say this, I should have mentioned this earlier on. I know this interview's gone way over. I so appreciate your time right now. I really do. Myself and my family had a mass UFO experience. It was on the date of the Freddie Mercury tribute concert on the 20th of April 1992. And my sister actually drew a picture of it. She still got it, this picture that she drew as a kid. And it was the most unbelievable, for me, experience that I ever had, and my family did. But you know what? My family find it very difficult to talk about because it's beyond their conceptualization. It's beyond their framework. So it is difficult for them to even try to, as they say, they don't feel a need to talk about it, but they can't. It's difficult to put into words.
Well, this is a problem inherent with all sightings, isn't it? First of all, the amount of people I've spoken to said they bitterly regretted, first of all, contacting the media because they've had the pee taken out of them for reporting. Yeah. The stupid part about this is that when members of the press, even the local guys, they interview somebody about the sighting, they're not prepared to conduct any research or take it any further, because let's face it, it's something that gets you nowhere. That sounds extremely interesting sighting that you and your family had. Hopefully we'll talk further, because that can go in volume 12.
Exactly. And well, this is my point, right? That if people out there watching this want to come to connect to you with sightings they have, they can just get through to you through your website, yes?
Yeah, or I'm on Haunted Skies. I'm on Facebook. I'm open for anybody if they want to. And the thing is, UFOs sightings and the books are not only about UFOs. They're obviously about. I mean, with Charles Holt and the Holt book, people for a start, it took people 30 years to realise that Charles I. Holt. Let me ask you, what does I stand for? Charles I. Holt.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. You've got me there. Sorry.
It's Charles Irwin Holt. And he didn't only serve at Bentwaters, Woodbridge. He served at a number of places. And in fact, he was a budding chemist when he was a young man. And that's what Charles Holt was going to do.
Right.
And he's also a bit of a comedian as well. And when he came over last year with his son, he brought his son Clifford. Really nice lad. But nobody was interested in Clifford, fortunately. But what I'm saying, there's a lot about the man. And with the books, it's not only about the UFO, it's about the person. And I'm not seeking to identify traits here, but it's about the person. And the least I can do, if somebody's got a sighting, I'll even put their favourite cat or dog in there, and you might laugh, but it's about people, isn't it? It's about us.
Yes, and I think that's what probably makes you a great interviewer, that you're able to connect with people and be on the same level with them. I think that's probably why people open up to you. I can see that totally. You're just you, and that's a gift that you've got, most definitely. We've barely touched the surface with so much.
Yeah, we could speak for a week on it.
We could.
But then, Kevin, people would be bored. That's the thing. People would get bored, sick of it. I think it was Dr. Alan Hynek that said, our problem with UFO stuff, it's too rich in imagery. There's too many cases. There's too many reports.
So many cases. Absolutely. Well, John, I would just like to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so interesting to cover just a few of the cases that we've touched, and also to get your truth as well onto this. And it's very much appreciated, the time that you've given us as well.
No, that's great. Now, I did mention Tony Peakman. I'm not plugging Tony Peakman. He's an ex-before guy. But what I'm saying, he taught me something. And I'd guarantee that when you interview Tony Peak, you will look at things differently. And both Dawn and I looked at things differently afterwards. We realised that what we were looking at wasn't always the right picture at all. An absolutely fascinating guy. You know?
I'm definitely going to get him on. But I would just say, John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.